Ananda stood quietly in a courtyard surrounded by tall bamboo, watching a funeral procession pass by outside. The slow steps of those in mourning carried a silent, heavy sorrow. The sight of a once distinguished prince, now reduced to a cold, lifeless bridge of existence, stirred a deep confusion in Ananda's heart. Why must every person face the reality of birth and death? How could a prince, once so radiant, become mere dust? If no one can escape this fate, what remains of all the pride and wealth one clings to in life? As he stood there, questions flooded his mind. Every falling leaf, every breeze brushing past seemed to whisper reminders of life's fragility. Birth and death, two extremes. What is the true relationship between them? If life is so brief, what is its real purpose? And if all eventually fades, what is the point of spiritual practice? These doubts felt like invisible chains, binding his heart and filling him with a profound sense of uncertainty. Lost in thought, he suddenly noticed a procession of noble carriages rolling slowly down the street. The people inside wore fine jewels and glittering ornaments, drawing envious gazes from those around them. Their prestige seemed so dazzling, but how long could that brilliance last? Could it guard them against the relentless grip of mortality? Even if they enjoyed every luxury while alive, once they were gone, would their earthly glories not be forgotten? Could they carry all that wealth and honor into another realm? Unable to find relief from these questions on his own, Ananda made up his mind not to let this confusion overwhelm him. He knew the only source of answers must come from the Buddha. So he composed himself with respect and approached the Buddha, determined to voice every concern in his heart. He bowed his head gently and joined his palms together, then spoke with caution. "Teacher, I am often troubled by my ignorance. I see how varied this world can be. Some people enjoy prosperity and live long lives, while others pass away too soon. Some endure one hardship after another, living in constant suffering, while others seem free from worry. Why do we experience birth and death? If life is so short, why devote ourselves to diligent spiritual practice? What is the truth of life and death?" Hearing these questions, the Buddha smiled with compassion and did not rush to answer. Instead, he invited Ananda to walk with him beyond the courtyard. Side by side, they moved along a path dappled by shifting shadows of trees. The Buddha spoke calmly. "Ananda, have you noticed this Bodhi tree?" Ananda looked up at the ancient, dignified tree, its branches full of vibrant leaves, as if protecting the land beneath. The Buddha continued, "This tree also undergoes birth and death. Every leaf falls in time, and each branch can wither. Have you ever seen this tree worry or grieve over that?" Ananda paused, reflecting on the Buddha's words. The tree grew new leaves each spring and quietly released them each autumn. It cycled through the seasons of birth and death without showing any sign of distress, as though everything occurred in the most natural way. The Buddha went on, "You see, this tree recognizes that birth and death are part of nature. It does not resist or cling. Its life is not a fixed endpoint, but rather an ever-changing process." His gaze seemed to reach far beyond the present moment. All living beings, including humans, share a deeper nature. Each one of us is originally pure. The cycle of birth and death is nothing more than the movement of the mind. Once you see through this, you can transcend birth and death. Ananda listened intently, yet still felt a lingering doubt. "Teacher," he said, "the truth of birth and death seems so profound. How can I truly grasp its meaning?" The Buddha smiled gently and after a brief silence said, "Let me tell you a story." He spoke of a time long ago, in the land of Kapilavastu, where there lived a wealthy merchant. He was greatly prosperous, with a household known for its affluence. The merchant had only one son, who had grown up surrounded by luxury and pleasure. The merchant cherished his son deeply, hoping he would someday inherit both wealth and business. Before the merchant passed away, he called his son to the window and spoke of a set of precious treasures buried in the back garden, advising him to wait until he matured before searching for them. After the merchant's death, the son inherited his fortune but continued to live indulgently, squandering his wealth until it was nearly gone. When all seemed lost, he suddenly remembered his father's words, and rushed to the back garden to find that hidden treasure. He searched everywhere but discovered nothing. The garden remained a barren patch of land. Feeling betrayed and angry, he believed his father's final words had been a cruel deception. All the wealth he had pinned his hopes on had turned out to be empty promises. At his lowest moment, an elder appeared and gently said, "The treasure your father left is not gold or jewels, it's that very piece of land. If you cultivate it with care, it will bring you true prosperity." Awakening to the elder's advice, the merchant's son began tending the garden. He learned how to sow seeds, water them, and enrich the soil. Over time, he grew adept at farming, and what was once barren became a bountiful orchard. Not only did he find a livelihood for himself, but he also offered help to those in need. In the end, he realized the wealth he gained from the land was far more valuable than any stash of gold or gems could have been. Pausing for a moment, the Buddha looked at Ananda with a warm, penetrating gaze. "Do you understand now? Every person's life is like that garden. Each of us has an inner field waiting to be tended. Many chase after pleasure and desires without realizing how to nurture their own hearts. Only when you let go of attachment and dedicate yourself to cultivating your inner life do you discover genuine wisdom and liberation." Ananda felt a sudden clarity emerge, yet there was still a lingering question. "Teacher, if this is the case, then what exactly is the truth of birth and death? Why do some people transcend it while most continue to wander in the six realms of existence?" The Buddha answered softly, "When the mind arises through causes and conditions, it likewise ceases when those causes and conditions disperse. This simple principle is profound, like a lightning bolt that illuminates the darkness within. Birth and death are not external forces imposed upon us. They arise from the karma created by our own minds. All phenomena of birth and death begin with a single thought. Greed, anger, and delusion are deeply rooted within us, causing us to circle endlessly in the cycle of life and death. If you can see this clearly and understand that everything arises and ceases based on conditions, you can break free from the bonds of birth and death." At these words, Ananda felt the weight of confusion lift. The mystery of life and death was not an impossible secret, it lay in the realm of the mind. By letting go of inner attachments and false imaginings, one could rise above birth and death, attaining true freedom. Even so, Ananda's mind stirred again with another question. "Teacher, since the root of birth and death lies in our thoughts, how should I practice in such a turbulent world? How can I find genuine peace?" The Buddha looked at Ananda as if fully aware of the concerns in his heart and spoke slowly, as though planting the seeds of wisdom. "The key to practice doesn't lie in external surroundings, but in how you observe and care for your inner life. Your mind is like a field. If you cultivate it well, it will yield boundless insight. The worries you have about birth and death arise because you can't see your inner state clearly. Look at the world around you. The wind blows, clouds form and scatter. These seem ever-changing, yet they all follow natural law. Real practice means returning to that natural order." Ananda took a deep breath and asked, "But my day-to-day life is full of so many complications. How can I remain calm in the midst of it all?" The Buddha answered in a gentle tone, "Even if your life feels like a surging tide, your mind need not be swept away. It can be like a clear mirror, reflecting everything without being stained by any of it. We often get lost in desires and attachments, thinking they bring us happiness. In reality, genuine practice isn't about chasing external pleasure, but learning to face our own desires, removing the confusion and clinging within. A tree experiences the cycle of birth and death over and over. A tree refuses the cycle of birth and death over and over. Yet its roots remain anchored in the earth, knowing its origin and final destination. Human life is the same. When you realize your true foundation, you will understand the meaning of existence." The Buddha's words seemed to resonate deeply, each phrase striking a chord in Ananda's heart. He closed his eyes, reflecting on everything he had heard. Gradually, he recognized that all his anxieties stemmed from internal unrest and clinging. Birth and death might appear distant, yet they are projections of the mind. What tormented him was not the reality of life and death, but the fear of them, the refusal to accept the unknown. Eventually, Ananda spoke again, If I can move beyond the fear of birth and death, how do I find peace in such a brief existence? The Buddha's eyes glowed with wisdom. With a gentle nod, he continued, every moment of life is an opportunity for practice. We don't practice simply to avoid birth and death. We practice so that we can perceive an enduring truth within the endless changes of life. If you clearly see the impermanence of existence, you'll no longer cling to birth and death. Instead, you'll view every moment as an opening for awareness. Think of a mirror. It reflects all things but remains undisturbed by them. A profound tranquility blossomed in Ananda's heart as he began to truly understand. The Buddha wasn't telling him to run away from reality, but to find stillness in the midst of the world's turmoil. The essence of practice isn't fleeing from birth and death. It's recognizing the core of who we are, even as life ebbs and flows. The Buddha went on, we cannot change the impermanence of life and death, but we can change our minds. When you observe each arising and passing thought, seeing how it appears and disappears, you will no longer be trapped by those thoughts. Imagine you're standing on a riverbank, watching the water flow by, yet your heart remains calm. That is the process of practice, letting your mind become a clear stream that flows without obstruction. A new sense of resolve filled Ananda. He realized birth and death are not under his direct control, but his mind is. Through awareness and letting go, he could discover lasting peace in this fleeting life. Spiritual practice is not about escaping birth and death, but rising above all attachment and discovering the truest self within. Practice is about getting to know yourself, the Buddha said, his words unlocking a hidden door in Ananda's mind. When you can examine each thought, understanding where it comes from and where it goes, you take hold of the source of birth and death. It will no longer bind you. At last, Ananda comprehended that the secret of life and death isn't some distant mystery, but lies in the awakening of one's own heart. The purpose of practice is not to reshape the world, but to transform oneself, clearing the fog that clouds our vision and revealing life's true essence. Moved by the Buddha's guidance, Ananda felt his mind grow serene. He understood that the reality of birth and death is not found somewhere far away, but within each moment of thought. The Buddha's teachings were like a bright lamp, illuminating the darkest corners of his soul. Yet that lamp still flickered slightly, the path ahead requiring careful attention to fully grasp its meaning. With a hint of hesitation, Ananda asked, Teacher, spiritual practice is vital, but when we reach the decisive moment of life and death, how do we achieve complete release? How can we genuinely keep our minds as clear and steady as a mirror without attachment or fear? A gentle smile crossed the Buddha's face as if he had long foreseen this final question. He answered with heartfelt sincerity, Ananda, birth and death are not something we can sidestep. They are a journey each of us must take. You wonder how to transcend birth and death? Essentially, you are asking how to let go of clinging. When you relinquish your fear of birth and death, you surpass it, discovering your most authentic being. Ananda fell silent. His thoughts rippled gently, reflecting on the Buddha's words. He finally saw that the pain surrounding birth and death does not come from the phenomenon itself, but from how we hold on to it. Birth and death are like a fleeting dream. If we remain lost in delusion, they feel overwhelmingly heavy. But if we can perceive their illusory nature, they fade like morning dew under the sun. Fear of life and death doesn't arise from the outside. It grows from our internal struggle with impermanence and the unknown. The Buddha continued softly, a falling leaf does not lament that it must drift to the ground, nor does it cling to its moment of budding. It simply knows its roots are firmly planted and the cycle of the seasons unfolds according to nature. Since it cannot be stopped, it need not be resisted. Like cool water quenching his mind, the Buddha's words helped Ananda realize the true purpose of practice. I see now, he whispered, bowing his head in gratitude and newfound understanding. Birth and death are but the arising and ceasing of the mind. Authentic practice means keeping the mind clear and steady, allowing one to move beyond fear and attachments. The Buddha's gaze radiated kindness and approval. recognizing that Ananda had taken a genuine step on his path. Yes, Ananda, he said. Seeing that truth will free you from birth and death, granting you true ease. Every moment in life can be an opportunity for greater awakening. Only through continuous awareness and practice will you discover genuine liberation. His voice carried a calm certainty as though he could see the transformation unfolding within Ananda's heart. As these teachings sank in, Ananda felt a heavy burden lift, replaced by clarity. All the doubts that had weighed on him for so long began to fall away like leaves in autumn. He no longer trembled at the thought of impermanence, nor did he worry over what he could not control. He now understood that life's significance does not depend on how long one lives, but on discovering true freedom and tranquility within the time one has. From that moment on, Ananda's determination to practice became stronger and clearer. Whether facing life or death, he would maintain a steady mind, recognizing that each instant carries the potential for awakening. Whatever came his way, he would respond with peaceful insight, never again bound by fear.